Councilman, your computer is muted.
Jay, you're muted. Still muted, Jay.
Okay. All right, then let me start over. Good morning and welcome to the Community Development Committee meeting of the New Orleans City Council. We are hereby called to order. We are still under a pandemic, therefore we are meeting virtually. Our public comment rules are such that we will accept public comment. You can go to council.nola.gov and fill out a public comment form. The public comments will be read. We will collect them and take a 15-minute break to allow them to come in. And the public comment will be limited to 1 comment per person per item. The comment should be limited to 2 minutes when read aloud, and they have to be germane to an issue on the agenda. And with that, would you please, sir, call the roll? Present.
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 Thank you. Would you please read the agenda?
Approval of the minutes of the October 13th, 2020. Agenda item 3, presentation of the City of New Orleans Motel program. Presentation of other new program established by ordinance number 26,319 of proposed rules for ratification and administration of the program. Presenter is Latika Harris. Agenda item 4, presentation of Brown's Area redevelopment. A presentation of redevelopment for Brown's Area site is multiple mixed income housing opportunities to present Michael Mayor. Agenda item 5, presentation of ordinance number 30,084, an ordinance to amend and reordain section 86-1.5 of the Code of the City of New Orleans to prohibit discrimination based upon hairstyles associated with particular race or national origin, and otherwise to provide with respect thereto. To present Neil Weeks, founder and executive director of Citizen G. And agenda item 6.
Nathan, thank you. Can I get a motion, please, to approve the minutes from the October 13th meeting?
So moved.
Can second. And please, Nathan, roll call on the approval of the minutes.
Yay.
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 Yay. Thank you. And according to, again, the rules we have to hereby, we're going to stand down for 15 minutes to allow public comment, and we will resume the meeting with the agenda item number 1 at the end of this 15-minute period. So see you guys in a couple of minutes. Well, 15 minutes. Thank you. Okay, folks, we are back in session. I understand that we've received 2 public comments, and we will proceed with the agenda. The next item of business is presentation on the City of New Orleans Motor Own Program, and Ms. Latifah Harris is the presenter. And Ms. Harris, if you would, good morning and welcome. And please, you may proceed. And we can't hear you.
Okay. Hi, my name is Latifah Harris. I'm the Deputy Director of Code Enforcement, and I'm here with Deputy City Attorney Kevin Hill, who works with finance. So I am going to go ahead and get started. Okay. So we're here to present the rules for the Mo-to-Own Good Neighbor Opportunity Program. Next slide, please. So in this program, responsible, engaged neighbors can benefit from taking care of the lots next door to them. This often is occurring anyway out of concerns for cleanliness and having an attractive home with curb appeal. Next slide, please. This program represents a new type of acquisition of adjudicated property. When property is adjudicated to the city, some of those parcels will be made available to the public in the Mo-to-Own Good Neighbor Opportunity Program. The program offers neighbors an opportunity to acquire property immediately to the right or to the left of that neighbor. The parcels chosen are those that fail to get bids on Civic Source and are adjudicated sales of property. New Orleanians can use the property next door to expand the boundaries of their property, or maybe even expand their structure in accordance with zoning rules. We know grass and debris is a problem that the city has to deal with every year at great cost. Here we offer owners a chance to translate sweat equity into ownership. The benefit to the city is that rather than spending resources to abate high grass and debris, there would be an opportunity for the neighbor next door to take over and be accountable. The benefit to the neighbor who applies is that they will be able to add value to their existing property without going through the efforts in the private market to try to find owners to make an offer who may not be receptive to sale for something many of them do anyway, mow the vacant lot next door. Next slide, please. This is sort of a visual example of what we often see, a property, a dwelling, and next door a lot that is overgrown and not being kept up. And so that's what we're kind of looking for, an opportunity for that person in that house to potentially be able to take care of that lot. Next slide, please. The requirements for the Good Neighbor Opportunity Program are that the applicant reside and own the property adjacent to the lot that they want to acquire, sharing the same frontage. The applicant should be in good standing, and they should not owe any taxes or liens to the city on any property they own in the parish. Nor should they have code violations on property in the city, so there should be no pending code violations. For applications, we want proof of occupancy and ownership of the property. Examples include any valid recorded transfer showing they own the property. That includes acts of sales, donation, and the like. Homestead exemption is considered proof of occupancy. The price of the property will be assessed value of the property plus closing costs. Owners will receive credit for $875, which represents expenses in maintaining the property. They will also receive credit for the $650 deposit they are required to submit if they are approved for the program. Next slide, please. So how to apply. The eligible adjudicated properties will be posted online, and we will be creating content on our websites to answer people's questions. We will provide the application online for download, and we will be including use of social media to promote the program and answer questions as well. We will also make sure to provide the application for pickup in our land use departments. As a part of the application and the agreement signed after approval, the applicant must agree to be responsible for keeping the vacant lot clear of debris and grass, and that grass must be kept to 6 inches or less in height, and they must do this for a year. At the end of the year, we will have applicants provide us with affidavits from neighbors or time-stamped photographs showing that they have maintained the property. Applicants in compliance will be given permission to close and sign the deed, and will tender the assessed value and closing costs at that time. The applicant will then become the owner of the property. Next slide. And so here's an example of what we could start to see in neighborhoods. Rather than an occupied dwelling in an overgrown lot next door, you have, we have an example of a yard where we have a couple lots that are fenced in together, so that you can kind of see what you could possibly do when you acquire the lot next door. It's an example where you have more space, more value, and more options for growth. Thank you for your time.
Another table.
Ms. Harris, thank you, but just a couple of clarifying questions. That last photograph you showed, that appeared to be more than one lot. So is it possible to have, is it multiple lots that you're adjacent to, or just the adjacent lot?
It's just the adjacent lot. I just was trying to find a visual that kind of showed something similar to what you would do, but it's not an exact match for what you would do necessarily.
And is it the adjacent lot on both sides, or are you limited to one?
I believe that what we envisioned was you being limited to one application, one lot on either side of you. And I think the ones that were chosen for the program fit into those parameters.
Okay. And now, somebody help me procedurally. Do we need to go to the public comment, or do I let my colleagues speak first? I didn't hear you. I know we've got one public comment. Let me take that. Jarvis, if you read the public comment, then colleagues, I'll circle back to you.
Good morning. First public comment is from Justin Smith, who is not being paid. Dear council members, while this is certainly a step in the right direction, ordinance calendar number 30240, ordinance number 26139 MCS, which is actually the correct citation for mode to own, adopted as amended and corrected on July 10th, 2014. And the proposed administrative rules to administer this program appear to fall short and are much more limiting than the underlying state legislation in LARS 95633. As proposed, the program is limited to the immediately adjacent neighbors, meaning those neighboring properties sharing a property line with the offending property. As you are aware, the blighted and overgrown lots impact the entire neighborhood, including those properties that are directly across the street or a few houses down. As the immediate neighbors might not have the means to or the desire to initiate this process, I would ask that you please consider broadening those eligible for the program using a radius distance from the offending property. Thank you, Justin Smith. That's the only public comment on this item.
All right, thank you for that. Council Member Nguyen.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Harris, I have a few questions. Is there a reason why we're not opening up like property behind, like a vacant, blighted property behind somebody's home?
Kevin, would you like to speak to that?
Sure. Good morning.
Good morning.
The initial idea was that the property was to front the main street, opposed to dealing with those on perhaps a back street. What I think you're alluding to is, say, a property may be vacant on the front of a street, and then a property immediately behind it is vacant on a street around the corner. The goal was to, the intent was to allow the residents on the front of the street to have access to that property, so that there wouldn't be a lot facing the front side of someone else's property on the block around the corner.
So what if you don't have a resident next to it, and then you have a resident behind it that has an interest in that property?
The resident behind it, does that resident the resident faces the street on the, around the corner, is that correct? Is that what
That's
you're
correct.
asking? So in that case, that the neighbor on either side would be the person, the residents who would have the opportunity to purchase that property or to participate in that program, opposed to the one around the corner, which would ultimately create a back. Let's say in the future, if there were development on that block, the other property owners, the front of their properties would be on the street, but then you would still have the back of the property around the corner facing the front of someone else's street. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, and I've seen it in my district already. And I think for me is how do we eliminate as many blighted property as possible? So I appreciate, you know, the look and positioning these lots, but at the end of the day, we don't live in a lot of these neighborhoods that are blighted. And I appreciate the steps that we're making, but I just feel like we can do a little bit more. And the reason why I'm asking is that I do have several residents in the lower 9 that have already inquired about the program. And this is one situation, and Mr. Joseph has been taking care of the lot behind his house. It's a lot that hasn't been, no one's buying it, you know, the neighbor, he doesn't have any neighbor around there because most of the lots are blighted and everything. And so that is something that I definitely would love for the administration to look at and to reconsider. I think that our goal should be to remove as many blighted property as we can in neighborhoods that are suffering from a situation like that. So that was one question.
Yeah, let me just interject if I may. In that particular instance, there should have been an opportunity for the person that you're referring to have made a purchase prior to this program. Keeping in mind, of course, that these properties were already offered at tax sale but did not sell for whatever reason. And then when they did not sell, they were adjudicated to the city. And so there was an opportunity for a person who finds him or herself in that position to have purchased it. And so maybe there is an opportunity for him to do a direct sale with the heirs. But as it relates to motor-owned program, the idea is to provide an opportunity for residents who live next door to an empty or blighted property to expand their yard. And so the scope we have to be mindful of is very narrowly tailored to fit a specific type of property. Otherwise, you could have a situation where any property around the city may qualify for the program. And so these are properties where there may be irregular sized yards. Obviously, they have blighted and the taxes have not been paid, opposed to, say, a property that in recent times has come into blight, but has not yet gone through the process according to law in order to make it available for this program.
So Kevin, you guys also mentioned that there will be a list. So these property will be identified by the program that is eligible for the motor-own. Do we have an idea? Do we have an idea of how many property will be on this list in 2021 based on the new rules?
Right now, we have over 100, and they're pretty widespread. And so those properties will be made available on the code enforcement website. We are also making them available on the finance website. So and the list will be constantly updated. Of course, it takes any property that is offered for a tax sale and does not sell at the tax sale and then adjudicated to the city. It takes about 5 years for that process to happen. And so there are properties in the pipeline. And so as those properties come out of the hopper, they will be made available on our public listing.
So that was my other part of the question, was like, how long do they have to wait before it goes to the program? So it's a 5 year once it's adjudicated?
That's correct. And what that does for us is that it allows us to satisfy all the constitutional requirements that are necessary so that we can confer good title to those who purchase the property by whatever means, whether that's through an adjudicated property sale or the motor-owned program. By the time they close on the property, we will have done what we believe is our due diligence to ensure that they will not have a problem acquiring title insurance, et cetera.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Palmer.
Thank you. I'd like to go back to Councilmember Wynn's comments because I agree with her. If I remember when we were dealing a lot with the lot next door program after Katrina, there was a way of if there was a vacant lot and the property owners on either side did not want it, then the property owner that backed up onto it had that opportunity. And I think that if we put that same system in place, then we can absolutely allow the property owner that backs onto a vacant lot to have the ability to maintain it and to get it.
I mean, that's something obviously that will require some changes on the ordinance, I would think. But equally important, there will need to be, I would think, some restrictions as to the use of that property fronting someone else's house. I mean, how many of us want to live next to a house where there's a driveway coming up the back or play yard or what have you? And so those are the kinds of considerations that, yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I agree with you. And I think you make some really great comments, but I think that those things can be baked into the ordinance, that there's certain things allowable, because I also don't think neighbors want to live next to an overgrown lot either that is not being maintained, and they have snakes coming into their yard or possums or what have you. And so I really think that this has been addressed years ago. And I think maybe we can use the same guidelines in that were previously applied to make sure that the issues that y'all are concerned about, which I think is very accurate, but also what Councilmember Wynn and myself see, I think we need to address the vacant lots any way we can. And look, I'm thrilled y'all are bringing this to us. I really am. This is something that I want to make sure that I also understand. I think this is something that a lot of citizens want. It makes a lot of economic sense for our city to do this. I just want to make a few more comments, though. I want to be really clear. There is a cost, right, at closing that when you purchase, when they get the lot after the year, right, or after you have clear title, they're still going to have to, cover legal costs from the city. Is that correct? Or any closing costs?
The cost of the closing costs would be equivalent to the application fee, all the fees that were asked for up front. There was a $650 deposit. What that essentially does is it covers all the research, the title research that goes along with clearing the title, ensuring that we can confer to people a good title. And so, and so that otherwise that would be a cost that would be annexed to the sale price. And so what they're essentially doing is they're paying it up front so that we, the city, does not have to incur the cost of all the research associated with that. So that's basically a research cost. So by the time they come to the end of a year, all they will be looking at paying for is the assessed value of the property, minus a credit for the cost of mowing for a year.
So they're going to have to pay for the assessed value of the property?
Correct.
Okay, and so
opposed to fair market value, which is by far less than what the market may, because fair market value is what people are willing to pay for it, however much that may be.
So what happens if somebody has maintained it for 2 or 3 years? In that interim, the property values have gone up in that neighborhood, they're ready to purchase the property and now they can't afford it?
Well, first of all, is the program is prospective, right? And so they would only be getting credit for the point at which they entered into an agreement with the city.
So wait, so the value of the property will be determined before they start mowing?
That is correct. We will know what that value is, just to ensure that the very thing that you described does not happen to them.
Right.
Because
Okay.
of course, that would markedly change the interest in the program.
Right, like
Yeah.
I don't want somebody to be caught in a situation where they're actually improving their neighborhood and then there's a double-edged sword where now they can't afford all
Right.
the fruits of their labor, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, great. And then when we also look at those properties, I hear that you say that they have to be on a list that the city approves, right? But I know that there are properties in my district that haven't paid taxes in 10, 15, 20 years. They've never gone to sheriff's sale. There's been, there's nothing attached to them. So why do we have to wait for them to go on a list?
Because we have to ensure that we satisfy all the notice requirements that the Constitution of the United States of America, as well as the Constitution of Louisiana, require of us. Otherwise, we have a situation where we could perhaps miss something and sell a property that there's not been adequate notice for anyone in the world who may have an interest in that property to step up and say, yes, I have an interest in this property. And so we ensure that we do our due diligence. Of course, baked into that is a 3-year redemption period. So essentially what we have is, beyond that redemption period, we have an opportunity to do our mail outs and our noticing to ensure that absolutely when you sign the dotted line, there's not going to be a situation that comes back on us. Now, every now and then, we've had some situations, but those are very few and far between.
Okay, so then can we also work at this another way? Instead of, can there be an opportunity for people to put a lot on that list and to put the city on notice? No, hear me out, please. So basically there's an ability, I have a person in my district, let's say, been living next to a vacant lot, never been on y'all's radar. The city's ignored it. It's always been a nuisance lot. Can they report that lot and put y'all on notice and say, I want to participate with this lot, which would then pull a trigger for y'all, the city, to do the research on that lot and to hold the owners of that lot accountable and put it into the process, into the pipeline, right, of adjudication and everything else. And in the interim, while y'all are doing it, that particular property owner next door can maintain it, and we're also alleviating blight right there.
And so then that person would have to be committed to doing this for a period of 5 years.
Yeah.
Keeping in mind, I don't know that how much interest there is in doing that for 5 years. Not realizing, of course, that there may be an opportunity that family shows up, because of course, when it starts looking good, people start showing up and they start staking their claim and their ownership. That's right. And then you have a problem.
But guess what? I mean, that also benefits everybody in the long run, as long as the person who's maintaining that lot is guaranteed to get their money back, similar to that redemption period, right? That the property owner is going to either have to pay the blight judgments, or they have to pay, if that property owner is basically tracking what they spend on the maintenance of that lot. So at the end of it, if another family comes in, they just have to pay that person for maintaining the lot. No different than if they'd have to pay the city for cutting the grass.
Well, here's what that looks like. The law, at the end of the redemption period, the city of New Orleans is no longer a part of that conversation, right? And so what you have are people fighting, going back and forth to court, trying to assert rights in either the ownership or to assert an interest in what they have done to maintain the property. Beyond 3 years, the city, we don't get involved in that. The law doesn't require us to get involved with it. And so you have people literally in court fighting back and forth. And I don't know that, people have an interest in going back and forth with somebody, especially since we're absolved from any responsibility or obligation to negotiate or to bring the parties together in some reasonable way to get to resolution.
So I think parties are going to be definitely willing to go into it if the other option that they have is that they have to continue to live next door to a vacant and blighted lot. I think if anybody sees a recourse, and if they're, if they think that there's some type of light at the end of the tunnel, I think people want to be able to take it into their own hands. I think if there is a process where they can basically register that lot with the city, it shows it from the date they do that. And if they show that they've maintained it every month, it's a whole nother level of accountability that if it does go into a lawsuit in the future, they can point to all of that. But I think there should be a way that our citizenry can register a lot adjacent to them to try to start a process. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
I do hear what you're saying. I will say this, that property is on someone's list somewhere, whether that is in code enforcement. I do believe that it's safe to say that it is somewhere. Certainly, I mean, we get calls all the time, right, to say, is this property available for even a tax sale? And we're able to tap into our system to advise that it is or is not, or that it's in the pipeline and where it is in the pipeline, et cetera. And so, of course, we're happy to take a call to provide information, but in terms of, I want this property on the list, that's something that can really get caught up in a whole legal wrangling that the party who's interested in it may not be interested in really getting it or appreciate.
I don't think you're necessarily hearing me. I think what I'm saying is there should be a way that a resident can register a lot that is adjacent to their house, that starts the process within your city government. Just like you said, you receive calls all the time. And then that lot will be triggered from y'all side to start focusing on it, to see if it is on another list that can get it then on this list of 100 or whatever that y'all are starting with.
No, I heard you perfectly clear, but I still maintain the position that I articulated. I mean, we're happy. Listen, I think we're all on the same page with regard to what we know needs to happen, right? And so we want to make this process as smooth and as easy as possible for the public, because we all have the same goal, which is to rid the blight and have neighborhoods come back to their, as great a place as possible. But of course, we always need to consider the legal ramifications that could come up, that could create a problem.
I hear you, but I still think there needs to be a way that individuals can sign up and they know the city is looking into this lot and finding out whether or not it's on a list. Too often in my office, I can't speak to my other council members, that we get calls, repeated calls on lots and other issues, and we never know whether or not, and the individuals never know whether or not there's a follow-up or where they are in a process, right? If they know by going onto the website and going on and following up on these individual houses, they can see the progress, right, of what's happening and whether or not it would even qualify then within this program. Do you see what I'm saying? It's a proactive way of
I completely get it, and there's no reason why they can't. I'm just pointing out the kinds of hurdles that creating a list, because of course there are some that may not come up for us for whatever reason that people are going to be interested in, and we're happy to take those calls to provide whatever information that we can about it, and making whatever information we have about the where this property is in the process, whether it qualifies, et cetera. We're happy to answer those questions. But again, blanketly saying, okay, call us up about it. I mean, there are any number of phases or places these properties can be. I think we all agree.
That's exactly what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying, is we need a list where we know where the different phases are with these properties.
We have no problem taking the call. Let's, how does that do? Whatever.
It doesn't solve the problem at all, sir. And I think maybe we should have an offline conversation because I don't want to be boring my colleagues. But it's not speaking to what I'm talking about, and maybe I'm not explaining myself correctly. But,
I fully understand where you are. Let's talk about it offline.
okay. And I do want to say that I would rather see another ordinance that goes back to what Councilmember Nguyen said in terms of the backyard. I'm not comfortable passing this ordinance on to the full council until we know whether or not Councilmember Nguyen's issues could be addressed.
Yeah.
Before.
Yeah.
Councilmember Nguyen, is that fair to say?
Yeah, yes. Thank you very much, Councilman Palmer. I would love for us to kind of discuss about that. And if we have to amend it, let's do it. Let's do it right. And again, just trying to get as many property as we can back into commerce. I've seen backyard, different backyard in different areas already, and we'll definitely look at those restrictions. I think, Kevin, you made a very good point that you don't want somebody backyard in front, next to somebody front yard that is not appropriate. So we'll definitely look into that. And but yeah. But I do agree with Christian about the list, because I think that as we're working, we got to work smarter. So we have a list where people can go and they type in the address so that people can know where that property is at, versus receiving 100 phone calls every day. And it could be for the same address 20 times.
That's right. That's right.
Right. And so I'm just trying for us to use our time more wisely and more, and we got to be more cost effective in reference to our resources.
Maybe a link on the website where we advertise the properties that are available, maybe a link or something or a tab on it could allow them to put in an address to make an inquiry about a property.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Maybe that'll. What do you think about that, Councilmember Palmer?
We can talk to
It's a
IT.
little more robust than that. It needs to be a little bit more robust than that. I think when you pull up an address, you should be able to see how many times it's been notified, where it is in the process, where it is in the adjudication process, who owns it. I mean, how long they've not paid their taxes. It should just be here's all the information, and then where the city is in trying to either expropriate it or what, so that, so just like Councilmember Nguyen says, when the public calls, everybody's on the same page.
Yep.
And then, I'm sorry, Councilmember, just let me know when you're finished. I have a couple.
No. I was just going to add on, like, it's going to save us. I know I email the department all the time when people call, and many times, we're following up with the same address. And I think just having that database, so when you type it in, everything pops up. It just makes really good sense.
I agree. I agree. And then we have a situation in one of my districts, in one of my areas, where it's horrible vacant lots, and the neighborhood would love to be able to clean it up. Is there any way, if nobody wants these lots, but neighborhood associations or church want to be able to clean it up, make it into, a park, or just maintain it? Is there any recourse for something like that? Currently,
that's not a part of the ordinance, but certainly revisiting the ordinance can fix it.
Okay.
I think these are all great ideas.
Okay, because it's a pretty bad lot. I know we've got people that can do it. And then finally, Councilmember Nguyen is still hearing this. I think I've often thought, especially with the lot next door, that there's some really good economic development opportunities for people that have landscaping businesses or a landscape architect to create before and afters and examples of what you can do to close in a front yard, different fence types, how you do your setbacks to make it more appropriate. It could be really low barrier entry for job creation, where people can go out and show folks how to attach a lot to their existing property in a more thoughtful manner. And that's done well. Like, I think like the last photograph you saw isn't really done well. The fence is too high. It's not inviting. It looks more like, a fort. But there are other ways of doing it to ensure that the setback, it meets code, meets city planning commission, what their recommendations are, and same with HDLC. So I just think it'd be great to have a design book and really maybe use this for business creation for some folks. Anyway, that's just a thought, but thank you. That's all I have.
Great idea.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Let me ask just a procedural question. How does a lot get to this process?
It first has to be delinquent in property taxes. We offer it at the tax sale, which happens yearly. If it fails to sell, it's then adjudicated to the city. Once the redemption period has run, then that property is eligible to go into this program, provided it's blighted, there's no structure on it, all those things that are laid out in the ordinance itself.
So a interested neighbor notifying the city that they are interested in this particular lot, even though it has not gotten to that point yet, how would that derail the process?
How would it derail the process?
Mhm.
I'm not sure I understand the question. I think
Well, where I'm going is basically what Councilmember Palmer was discussing is if you've got a lot that is currently not being maintained, but it's not to the point yet of being eligible for this process, having a neighbor say, hey, look, I want to do this, it doesn't change any of the legal requirements that are in place to make sure that somebody's property just isn't taken from. All of their constitutional rights would still be adhered to. It's just that the city would have noticed that Ms. Smith and Ms. Jones is interested in this lot, and then you'd have a timeline that they actually started that process even before it got to be eligible. So the 3-year prescription could be 5 years if they're willing to maintain it that long. But at the end of the day, and again, my knowledge of this may be limited, but I don't see how that stops anybody from doing the other due diligence necessary to go through the whole process just because somebody has served notice that they want to try to acquire it through this way.
the only issue that I see with that is that the owners of the property, they could show up at any given moment and say, "Oh, thank you for cleaning it up."
And I think that's real.
It's like buyer beware sort of thing under that analysis.
But it's buyer beware anyway, because even after they get it, don't the owners who had it have a period to be able to come and redeem it?
Once these properties again have already gone beyond the point of redemption, and unless let's say that somebody comes up in year 6, right, and decide that they want to file a lawsuit, then of course they're free to do that. But the reality of it is, by that time, all of their rights will have been terminated, and the likelihood that a judge is going to overturn that, provided all the noticing that we take the time to do have been done. And so the likelihood that they'll prevail is not very.
Well, going back to the buyer beware premise, I think that given the option of having a nuisance remedied would likely balance off against the fact that, okay, if I can't get it in the long run, then say la fee, but I've made my quality of life better in that period leading up to it. So I still think it's something that we ought to be intentional at looking at, because the whole idea of this program and the others like it is to improve the quality of life, not for the residents that aren't there, but for the residents that are. And if there's something that we can do to make their lives better, I think we ought to be intentional in trying to get that done. I think it's
agreed. Agreed. And then of course, beyond the 3-year redemption period, then that becomes a fight between the property owner next door who's maintained the property, et cetera, and not the city of New Orleans.
And I get it. Again, we cannot give anybody's legal rights away. I understand that. But trying to do whatever we can to have the quality of life of those folks that are there, living there every day, if there is something that we can do to help nudge that along, I think it's a win-win. And if it turns out that the owners come back in that redemptive period and say, oops, never mind, then okay, but it's still worth the roll of the dice to me, because your life is for the people that are actually living there, not those absentee landlords that may decide to come back. And then again, they may not decide to come back. Just something to put into the discussion.
Yeah, so again, we're happy to have a link, and we'll get with IT as this process goes along to ensure that that residents have an opportunity to make us aware of properties in their area, and of course, as Council Member Wen mentioned, that they could put the address in, and then everything that's relevant to that property is made available. Similarly, the assessor's website has that very same information that shows that a property, the ownership of the property, how much is owed in taxes, etc.
And that information, let me be clear, is that information available today, or is that something we're working towards?
The information is available today. It's just a matter of how to find it.
Well,
you know, it may mean, yeah. And so,
that's where the rules come in, because if you've got to be Sherlock Holmes to go figure out where to find it, then that makes it relatively difficult.
I don't mean that finding that information is that obscure. I mean, it's about being able to navigate the assessor's website, going on to civicsource.com to do an inquiry, those kinds of things. So it is available.
Let me tell you, I mean, I get chided by my colleagues all the time. I'm not the most technologically astute cat ever born, all right? You shouldn't have to have a degree in electrical engineering or computer programming to be able to navigate a website. We ought to have something that is very simple. Available lots or nuisance lots or tax adjudicated lots or something that anybody can have enough knowledge to be able to go and check. It shouldn't be that you've got to figure out, and this is no dispersion on you, believe that. But
because I'm an IT guy, and
you shouldn't have to know how to navigate a website to get a simple question answered. And if you've got a lot with grass as tall as me, you ought to be able to just put that address in and say, and all of the issues with it pop up, as opposed to having to figure out what to do. And I just think that is not too big of an ask. And
I'm sorry, I think code enforcement already has that ability, but I completely understand what you guys are saying. I'm not a techie myself. I'm a lawyer. I don't do technology very well. I have problems with my cell phone sometimes. And so I fully appreciate what that means to have to go from place to place to try to get information. And so as this program, I believe it should, I mean, I'm not a techie, but I think it should be relatively easy to create some links so that the information will populate and people aren't required to go all over the place to get what it is they're looking for. Is that safe to say, Latifa?
I think that we can definitely have a discussion with IT. I mean, I'm not a tech person either, but I do know, I'm also a lawyer. I do know that we have amazing people working for us, and we can definitely make sure that whatever we have is as accessible as it can be, you know. So that is what we're going to be looking at, because we do want people to be able to answer their own questions as opposed to having to try to find somebody to answer their particular question about the program. So we want to have as much information out there as possible. And finding out where properties are at, I guess that is something that we can discuss how to do. Because of course, I think we need information from finance that wouldn't all be in code enforcement, but that is something that we could discuss, of course.
And my final question is, when will those discussions take place, and when can we expect to get some sort of response back as to what the feasibility or what the likelihood of being able to put that entity in place? When can you all start talking IT to get this moving?
I mean, I think the conversations when we had the first public hearing on this, there were some calls made to IT to make links available to, for example, the code enforcement webpage. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And even in finance. So it's those conversations are already in progress. It's just that the things that we're talking about today, we need to have a conversation with them. Yeah.
About what's possible. We need to find out what's possible with you know,
It's
of course,
all-
the staff has.
And
Well,
again,
I would love-
I'm agreeing with you. We need to have the conversation. I'm just asking for a timeline as to when the conversation is going to be. I don't want to, I know you got a lot to do. The world is spinning. I get all of that. This was not on your radar before today, but we need to have, this brings out a situation that we need to have addressed. And I'm just, again, I'm not beating you up and saying it's got to be finished by tomorrow, but I want to be able to know, do I schedule you for my next community development meeting, or do I schedule for 2 from now to be able to tell us where we are in getting that sort of public access to simplified information done? When should I expect you all to be able to come back and tell me that we are getting that happening?
Okay, why don't we get with the rest of the people that are in our working group and see and respond to you guys with some type of date and timeline. In
All right,
terms of what we're looking for, are we looking for clarification? Are we looking for the ability to express interest in adjudicated lots, vacant lots in this particular program? Or are we looking for all finance type of information in terms of tax sales?
Both.
Well, it's actually 2 different tracks. I mean, one is to figure out if we can have a property referred to this program. But I think the more basic question is, how do you find out if the lot at 123 XYZ Street, what is the issue with it? Where is it? We've got multiple different pots that it could be in terms of its adjudication, in terms of its processes, in terms of its, whether it's been adjudicated and all this other stuff. Where can a citizen go to just put that address in and see that populate as to it's here, it's there, or it's somewhere else, to know what their options could be? So it's actually 2 different questions.
Okay, yes, because we have one stop that it deals with certain things that it doesn't deal with the finance stuff at all. That's
Right.
a separate
And
system. So I get to have multiple conversations probably.
Councilmember Banks, do you mind?
Please.
So there's a product called Loveland that municipalities use all over. I've used it before. I've tried to talk. It's amazing how easy it is. It's a parcel database. That's all it is. So when you pull up the parcel database, you have all the information from safety and permits. You know whether or not a permit's been pulled. You have information from the assessor. You have, you know exactly where it is on the GPI, whether or not it's in a historic district. It also can basically overlay the property surveyor that we have, which is really a great tool from CPC. And so it's really, all the technology is there. It's been done. It's easy enough to do. It's just whether or not the city, it's something I've been talking about for years and been really trying to show folks how to use it. It can be on an app on a phone. It works beautifully, and they do it. And I know they're not the only product. There are other products out there, but literally, because each parcel has an identifying code, right? And so that's how you map every single parcel in a city. And actually, and they're mapping the world. But it's easy enough. I'd love to show y'all, and I'd love to have a deeper conversation about it. And like I said, it could be this program, it could be another one, but they've already set up all the programming. So they just link all the different technologies together in one place. So all you do is type in an address and it's all on one information.
That sounds great. I like that.
Mhm.
I can use that.
Yes, I can use it, and I'm not that that's my team. I'm not very savvy, but I can use this pretty easily.
But Loveland isn't free, is it?
You know, it's not that expensive. It really isn't.
Okay.
They did my whole district for and I pay like $100 a month. So it's really not that expensive. They link it up to Google. They link it up to Google Maps. So you also have immediate photographs that were on Google as well. But the city, I'm sure they have municipal, rates or what have you. But again, I don't want to look like I'm pushing one program. I'm sure there are multiple.
Yeah, sure.
Just
But
something
what
to
I'm
look.
saying is there's technology out there that's already done this, and they've done it at the behest of cities and at the behest mainly actually of neighborhood associations. They started it in Detroit, and it really became a great tool for neighborhood associations that had nuisance lots and had nuisance ABOs. So they could actually use this to track how many ABOs had fines on them, whether or not the ABOs were in compliance. Because say, for instance, Councilmember Banks puts 50 provisos on a business, a local business, right? Well, how do you find all those 50 provisos to make sure whether or not this bar in your district is actually adhering to those 50 provisos? Well, they would be on this lot size. See, look how much Councilmember Banks loves this idea. And that puts the tool into the neighborhood and the community as well, you know, being able to track it. People can also upload photographs of the property in real time to the site. And then they're time date stamped. So you know when the photograph was taken, which would obviously help in the maintenance of this program, because then you have a complete site. If a property, if the neighbor cuts the grass and they just take a photograph, they upload it to the site with the date time, then you already have this property owner has been doing this every month for the past 2 years, and we have proof here on the site. That's open and transparent because everybody can access it.
Love that.
I love this site, and I'm sure there, like I said, there are other sites to it, but these guys create, and they actually came down to New Orleans when I was in office for my first term. They came down, and we had lots of conversations post Katrina on how to data map your assets and also your problems. And they took all that information to Detroit, and they've been like the forefront in Detroit in terms of mapping blight and allowing neighborhoods to take control of their communities through technology. So
Awesome.
I'll send you all their info.
Sounds good.
Look forward to it.
Colleagues, are there any other questions? All right, folks, thank you very much. We've still got some work to do. I think that this is a start. Obviously, the whole intention is to address these blighted lots, and these suggestions, I think, are definitely worth exploring. I see nothing wrong with someone having a big backyard. So having a lot behind it being included in, I really don't see as problematic, but we will investigate this further and keep moving. But again, this is a good start. So with that, thank you all.
Thank you.
We'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the redevelopment of 1400 Barone, the old Brown's Dairy site. This presentation will be led by David Heck, Michael Meredith, and Peter Aramont. And there'll also be members of the administration who will be on. I am extremely excited about this development. It has been a focus of mine since I got here to try to expand and create affordable housing. And that is what this project is intent on doing. So this particular model is something that I think that we can not only use here, but throughout the city. And this is likely to be something that could be used nationally that could help to make housing opportunities available to working families. So with that, gentlemen, please proceed.
Good morning. Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to discuss this. We're really excited about it. We've been working on this concept for about a year. It begun with just a group of, the development community getting together to try to find solutions for affordable housing. We all realize it's a huge need in New Orleans, nationwide, as Councilman Banks said. So we appreciate you letting us speak with this committee. And Councilman Banks, thank you. He's been phenomenal in helping us roll this out. We've been going on a little dog and pony show previously with this, with some early stages. We spoke with the mayor's office several times, and everybody, as you probably know, from Bob Rivers and Margiana, Brenda Bro, Damon Burns has been great. So we continue to unveil this and then work on the concept. And I'm going to give kind of a 20,000 foot view of this, and then I'm going to hand it off to David Hecht to talk about design and the actual project. And then Mike Meredith is going to join in to talk more about some of the benefits, some of the numbers, the finances, and kind of the ask that we're dealing with. Like I said, when we first started educating ourselves on affordable housing, we realized there were a lot of opportunities and programs out there. Most of them really worked better for rental, units and people were using those. But as far as home ownership, a lot of the programs didn't fit together. You couldn't layer them. There are too many restrictions. And there were even some calls for some funding sources that came out from the city of New Orleans previously that nobody even picked up on or nobody bid on because they didn't work. So that was our problem. We always felt if we could figure out a way to do ownership affordable housing that made sense, not only from a regulatory standpoint, but from a profit standpoint, similar to historic tax credits, developers would jump on it. And we are trying to put a model together that not only works, for this site, but can be replicated to individual lots all over town. That not just us, of course, but any developer out there wanting to use this plan could do so. And we look at it where it could be an immediate and huge impact for the city of New Orleans. That being said, Brown's Dairy site came along. You all know it. It's been on the market off and on for a couple years now. The bank had taken the property over, and we originally had no interest in it. But then we figured this would make a great opportunity for a pilot project. So a group of developers, like I said, David Hecht, Michael Meredith, Brian Gibbs, Mike Sherman, we're all working together on this. And the nice thing about this is from an ownership standpoint, as opposed to rental, which is nothing wrong with that, this will be able to create wealth to a homeowner. To a resident looking for a place to live. And also from just owning a house, they can actually become a landlord and dictate their future, which is phenomenal. If you could go to the next slide. I won't go over all the details, but the concept is simple. I mean, New Orleans was based on a fabric of singles and doubles. If you can get a homeowner targeted in the 80 to 140% AMI range into a double, they can limit their down payment. They can use the income from the attached unit of the double to defer their monthly cost, and we can create a lot of wealth and hopefully kind of change the dynamic of the wealth gap in New Orleans. And as Mr. Banks said, beyond our borders, it would be phenomenal. Our project in a nutshell will be a mix of singles and doubles developed over phases. The first phase we're working on now is 7 units. The market will determine future phases which works best as far as square footage, as far as singles versus doubles, as far as anything else is concerned. And this project is shovel ready. There's a property adjacent to ours over on O.C. Haley, which another developer who's very, very good at what they do is going to do a multi-story building. That probably won't come out of the ground for 2 or 3 years. One of the benefits to this project is, as I said, it's shovel ready. We've purchased the site, financing's in place. We have demoed the interior, some of the issues of the building with environmental issues, that's done. And we've submitted for our demo permit and are waiting on council approval for that phase. So we have met with the City Planning Commission. We're lining up all our requirements to get going on phase 1, and we're very excited about it. One thing that is key to this, and this will be presented in future presentations and slides, is there's 3 components to this that the city will need to become our partners in. It's a lot of thinking outside the box and acting outside of the box, because a lot of this really doesn't exist today. The first will be a pilot, and the pilot is not for the developer. The pilot is for the individual homeowner. Second is soft second. We spoke to some local banks. We've worked with Damon Burns. We feel like we have a handle on that. That'll be something that we'll need to cooperate and partner with the city on. And the third will be city infrastructure dollars. We've got some ideas on that, not only to, basically do site work, demo, but we're also looking to put Thalia Street back in to reestablish the street grid, which will make the residents in that area really happy. So once again, we're excited about this. David Hecht, we'll turn over the project to now. We'll talk about design and the project, and Mike Meredith will wrap up. But one thing in parting on my part, we've been working on this 6 months. You're going to get 10, 15 minutes. We can't adequately explain all the details and the steps that we've been through and what we need to do on this call. But please, you guys know me, these other guys, any one of us at any time will drop what we're doing and either do a Zoom call or meet face to face. And we're passionate about this. So this is something that we'd like to roll out as soon as possible. And like I said, it's underway and we hope that everybody agrees with the opportunity that it provides. So I appreciate it. And I'm gonna turn it over to David right now. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Peter, and thank you, members of the council, for your time and attention, and to Councilmember Banks for your support thus far. If you could go to the next slide, please, I'll give you a brief overview of our development plans for the site. This is just to orient everybody. One of the things that we're incredibly excited about with this property is that it's located in an area of high market value, and it's adjacent to all the, or not all, but many of the key core economic drivers of our city. So being able to create for sale affordable housing in this location is a really wonderful opportunity for our community. If you can go ahead to the next slide. The next slide, this zooms in on our site. We are 2 blocks from the Pontchartrain Expressway and the Central Business District, and 1 block off St. Charles Avenue. Our property is bounded by Orado Street on the downtown side, Martin Luther King Boulevard uptown, and is between Carondelet and Baronne Street. And we have most of 2 city squares, and it's 3.89 acres in area. One of the interesting characteristics of the site currently is that Thalia Street is interrupted. It does not continue through the site. And one of the first things that we want to do is reconnect the street grid and rebuild Thalia Street. We think that's a really important thing from a urban planning and sort of development standpoint, is to recreate that path through the site. And importantly, it allows us to create additional house lots that will front the new Thalia Street, which supports our efforts to create affordable for sale homes. If you go to the next slide, please. This is a historic Sanborn map from 1937. And I really love showing this image because it speaks to a lot of what we're trying to create. You can see here the historic residential scale of the buildings on our site. They were all singles and doubles for the most part originally. And you see Thalia Street running through the middle of our site. So we looked at this historic precedent as well as the historic development patterns throughout Central City and the rest of New Orleans as the jumping off point for our site plan. And if you go to the next slide. And then this is our site plan. So as you can see, it's very similar in a way to the original 1937 map for the site. Thalia Street runs through the middle of our site, and we've created 53 house lots. Some will be singles, some are doubles. We have the potential to have some townhouse units, which we're showing in this plan. Along the new Thalia Street, we've created a small park, which you can see on the downtown side of Thalia Street. That park is something we envision as an amenity for the community and for the neighborhood. Young families, anybody who's living here, to have some accessible open space in the community, we think is really important. This also has the added benefit of possibly serving as a stormwater mitigation device. We spent a lot of time trying to resolve parking. So we've introduced some alleyways to provide parking behind the houses, as well as parking on the street. So we have parking for all of our homes, which I think is an important part of the community. But we've also tried to design it in such a way that the houses are all on the street and on the sidewalk, as one would find in a traditional New Orleans neighborhood. I think that's incredibly important for neighborhood and community building. And lastly, we're trying to create a diversity of house types and house styles, one that, again, is really consistent with what one might find in an historic New Orleans neighborhood. So we think together all these physical attributes plus the mixed income quality of the development will really create something that'll be a viable and long-lasting community and neighborhood within Central City and within New Orleans. So that's what I've got as an introduction to our development. I'll now pass things over to Michael Meredith, who will talk through some of the financing and investment needs for the project.
Yeah, appreciate you, David. If we could go to the next slide, and thank the council for taking the opportunity and allowing us to present what we think is a transformative project for the city of New Orleans and the Central City neighborhood, and appreciate Councilmember Banks for his open ear and ability to see, our vision and be able to present it to the rest of the council as well too. So I got the tough job of asking for the money, and this is, a gap that we need in most affordable housing projects to be able to provide this housing for our clients. Typically, in this instance, probably highest and best use is not to include that, but we made it a point as a development team to include a high percentage of affordable homes here, not only on the single family side, but on the double side, to be able to create what we see as generational wealth for our clients down the road. And overall, what we have here is about a $1.4 million gap. And that goes directly to our home buyers. Us as developers, we've capped our fee, similar to the recent NORA proposal that's out in Pontchartrain Park. We've limited the amount of profit that we have, and really are looking for a subsidy in the form of down payment assistance, infrastructure dollars to the project to be able to provide those houses at an affordable price for our homeowners, 80% or below AMI. So the three things that include are on infrastructure side, we proposed a potential purchase of Thogger Street from the city in that transaction. We've also looked at a soft second program that can be administered by FANO or the city of New Orleans to be able to provide some subsidy to our homeowners. And what's specific about that is, we've also looked at a due on sale model where these funds can be reciprocated as these homes change, and this pot of money can be continued to reinvest into the community and the city. And then a pilot. I know that the city and Mayor Cantrell has in the past looked at a model to be able to reduce property taxes for affordable homes. And I think our team has spent a lot of dollars, a lot of legal minds have come together to figure out a structure that works to be able to do this. We've talked to FANO, we've talked to other council, and we think we've figured out a very straight path to be able to provide some relief for affordable housing. And here, in our plan that gets us, 15 affordable homes. And as an affordable housing developer, we always look at, what are our subsidy dollars going to? And here, total, we're looking at about $126,000 per unit in investment, over long term to each affordable home, which we think is in comparison to CDBG standards, I think right within line. But it's also in comparison, if you look at the mandatory inclusionary zoning estimate, typically is somewhere between $277,000 and $370,000 to create one affordable rental unit. And what we're doing here is we're creating home ownership. I think that's totally transformative, to the neighborhood, and gets us to create what we all want to see, which is a mixed income neighborhood, where folks of all incomes, ethnicities, and all that can live in one place. So go to the next slide. We can talk about some of these community benefits. These are a high level, right? This is a pretty large project. It's a $21 million investment that we're going into the Central City neighborhood, right? 15 affordable homes, 75 new units. But I think there's benefits all across the board. The biggest one for me, I think, is the ability to replicate this, right? This is a model where we know that a light is going to be shined on our development, and we want other folks to be able to see this, to see how the city supports this, so that we can really solve our affordable housing problem, not on the rental side, but also on the affordable side. So, here we need the city support. This is a gap that we're looking to fill and to make sure that we can provide affordable we'll and I think we'll end it here and thank for you guys' time that we can be able to continue this discussion to figure out how we get this thing to the finish line.
Gentlemen, is that it for the presentation?
Yes.
That's it.
Okay. Colleagues, do you have any questions?
I do, Mr. Chair. This is Cindy. Well, first of all, congratulations. I think this is an awesome development. Really great for the residents in Central City. But I wanted to ask, who's going to administer the pilot for you guys? Is it Fano?
That's our plan right now, yes.
Okay. So you are in communication with Fano in reference to administering the pilot?
Yes, we are. We introduced this project to Damon very early on in his team, and we're actually about to start the pre-application process with Fano for the pilot.
All right.
Councilmember Palmer?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Banks. This is a fantastic project in the district. I have a few questions. And it's all because I absolutely 100% agree that this could be replicated around the city and potentially scaled up. So I think it's really important that all the partnerships can be existing and replicated, right? And so when you talk about the public dollars, if you go back to that slide, has any of that money been set aside for you with this project yet? When you talk about the infrastructure needs, can you go back to that slide that shows what the public investment you're asking for? Right there. So has any of that money been guaranteed now for this project?
It has not. This has been our initial ask, for the city. So that none of that has been allocated through any CDBG or home funds for the project as of yet.
Okay. And so in terms of the soft second money, is there money still left over from soft second money? Are we sure that there's still money in that pot?
I think in our last conversation with Mayor Cantrell, I think there are potential other NOFAs that are coming out. I wouldn't say the entire 500,000 is there. We haven't got the answer yay or nay from the city, but the direction from Mayor Cantrell has been for us to continue to converse with Marjoriana, potentially partner with Nora and other firms. For us, we look at this as a potential road, right? And overall, our gap is $1.4 million. So if that comes from this pot or that pot, we want to be able to work with the city and you guys as the council to figure out our easiest way to be able to fill that gap. So we haven't got those allocated. This was kind of our first initial thought. But again, we're open to conversation and suggestions on how we fill that gap moving forward.
Okay. Is there, when you looked at your site costs in terms of potential remediation, I think I saw that on one of your slides, is it determined to be a brown site, a brownfield site?
We've completed the necessary environmental remediation on the site, which for the most part was modest. We, in preparation for demolishing the building, we've removed some hazardous material from the structure. There were some small pre-existing issues on the site from the previous use that the previous owner of the site remediated the majority of them. I think, Peter, you maybe can speak to that in a little more detail. But in terms of our overall development budget, the costs associated with that are relatively modest.
Okay.
That is part of, however, I should point out that is part of the site and infrastructure costs that are unique to this site and would not be in play if somebody were to buy or try to implement this same strategy on a smaller residential lot.
Okay.
We're trying to bring our site up to the standards of what one might find if one were to try to do this on a single residential lot.
Great. If you could also, just because the only reason I brought it up is that you may already know this, but RPC has a brownfields program where there is money in that pot, a significant amount to help with remediation for these. And they're often in the form of grants, right? And they also help pay for not just a phase 1 environmental, but also a phase 2 environmental. So that might be something you want to explore. I think this program is, my brain is racing because it's so great on so many levels. I'm a firm believer in the shotgun double to build wealth and equity. That's how I started. You know, my husband and I bought for $35,000 our first house, which was a shotgun double, which allowed us, as we bought it at 24 years old. And as we rented out, it helped us take a mortgage out and do another house. And that's where we are today because of that very first shotgun double. I find it really difficult, you know, when I do doubles, that we have appraisals from the banks that appraise doubles less per square footage than a single, right? Even though you're putting in 2 kitchens, 4 bathrooms, you know, in one structure. How is that going to affect your financing? And I really wonder how we can change that whole conversation anyway with these appraisers, and why they don't put more a higher square foot value on those types of houses, right? Because that's where you can actually rent out money and get money coming in if you're a homeowner. Are y'all seeing that as a barrier, or have you been able to work that around?
It's an important point and valid question that you raise. I mean, I think we see the appraisers as being kind of lagging indicators in the market. And part of what we're hoping to prove out here is that the market for doubles is stronger than kind of historical data maybe suggests, and start to kind of change that paradigm a little bit. For our project, as it pertains to the affordable for sale doubles, we're working with a number of lenders that are going to work with the home buyers on acquiring the homes. And because we're effectively selling those houses at cost, we don't expect to have any appraisal issues on those. We do know on some of the market rate doubles that we'll have to wrestle with the challenges you're raising.
And I would love for updates on this process from y'all, right? Because smaller developers are having the same issue, and it disincentivizes people to build doubles.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big problem, because I think that is how we build wealth and equity. And when we have a city that's lost 10 points in home ownership in the African-American community, this could be a huge win if we figure out a way of doing it and making those numbers work. When we also talk about infrastructure, one of the big things that Sewage and Water Board did this year that is very disheartening to developers, especially small developers, is the utility contractor, and having to now, it's on the developer to pay for the tie-in from the house to the center line, right? On a property development this size, it's going to be pretty substantial. Granted, I think they said in their legislation that they quietly passed this spring that if it is affordable housing, they will offset it somehow, but it seems kind of nebulous. The whole program is nebulous. And in fact, I think what Sewage and Water Board did is disincentivizing more buildings being built, especially in the affordable realm in the city. So how are y'all going to be addressing that? Are you working with Sewage and Water Board to figure out those tie-in costs? Because that's going to be significant.
Yeah, it's a great point. It's definitely something that's on our radar. We are planning to sit down with Sewage and Water Board and discuss this issue with them. Because the site was used historically for single and 2-family residential, we're going to try to make that case with Sewage and Water Board.
They changed the law, honey, so that now basically every property from 1953 that used to be they're responsible for, they're not anymore for existing lots. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, no, we agree, and it's a real challenge. And this one, it's unfortunately part of our infrastructure cost. So there is this situation here where it's kind of like robbing Peter to pay Paul, and part of the public investment in the infrastructure on the site we're looking at is offsetting all our infrastructure costs. And if this Sewage and Water Board stamp policy increases our infrastructure costs, we're looking to balance that out so we can maintain the levels of affordability.
And look, and I know you're very fortunate that where you're developing it, your council members on the Sewage and Water Board, which could be helpful. But I will tell you that we'll add anywhere between $6,000 and $12,000 per house.
Yep.
Just to try to tie that in.
I want to double back one thing, Councilman Palmer. You hit the nail on the head. There are many reasons why this isn't being done currently.
That's right.
And some systematic changes that need to take place. When we initially met with all the banks, they were all excited about it. They all have, mission to help with affordable housing and this and that. And we said, here's our double, here's how it works. And they basically said, oh, wait a minute. We're not going to deal with your credit. We're going to deal with homeowners' credit. And they started discounting everything.
That's right.
So a lot of them are portfolio loans. When we got down to it, all the local banks would package up loans. Then they syndicate them and sell them and package them. And their answer was, well, there's too much risk in here for any of these syndicators to take these portfolio loans. And it's been about 6 months for us to tell these banks, you got to carry some of these loans on your books. We're all taking a risk here, but it's a risk in New Orleans it's worth taking. So part of the long-term solution will be changing that paradigm shift with, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, just to get in there and tell them that this is an investment worth keeping on your books and that it works. And I think we're just addressing that. With this, we're going so fast, we won't be able to make those changes overall. But in the long term, we're all going to have to work together with the city and developers to say, this can work, but let's rewrite the rules. And I think that we've had some preliminary success with that, but there's some heavy lifting to do.
Yeah, well, please let us know how-
Peter, that ties into what I said initially about this being transformative, that this program can be exported not just from this development throughout New Orleans, but throughout the entire country. We've got to change the systemic built-in impediments to affordable housing. And there's a myth that affordable housing is just about rental units for folks. It's not about rental units. It's about affordable housing and affordable home ownership also. And this gets us closer to that. And this will let the world know that this can happen and that it is a good investment, as opposed to whoever said it, whenever they said it, that it was a bad investment and the banks won't do it. We've got to show them that this will work.
Absolutely. You're 100% right. And too many times New Orleans gets used as an example for things that don't work. This could be an opportunity to hang our hat on, whether it be through FANO or the council or whoever. All of us can be able to say, this is where New Orleans did something that can work. And hopefully other people try to copy it. So we'd love for that to happen.
And I agree with you because, the shotgun double is our vernacular, right? And I think the problem is the banks for years have been looking at the doubles being turned into singles, which, as modern times came, people wanted larger properties, but also it was also in response, right, to neighborhoods that were in desirable landlocked areas. And also the fact too is that they were disincentivizing from keeping doubles because of the financial structure and the way they were appraised. And so that's actually limited our ability, right? As a small developer, it's cheaper for me to take a double and turn it into a single than to make a double, right, out of it, because then it saves me kitchen, bathrooms, et cetera.
Sure.
Now I'm trying to redevelop doubles for the same reason that you are, and it becomes a financing issue, right? And so it's really important, again, to try to figure that out. So I'm going to be watching this really closely, and I hope that we can be a partner. Councilmember Banks, anything that we can do on the council to support you would be fantastic. And then finally, there is STR money that we are setting aside, if you remember, Councilmember Banks, that we worked on. So if there's some way that we can figure out a way that they could even access that, if we have to do gap funding somehow, would make a lot of sense, because that was the intent, right, was for affordable housing. So even if it's just pinpointed to those units to make them feasible, I think it's something that I know I on the council would support. I'm sure some of my colleagues would. But we worked very hard with the short-term rental piece to ensure that we had money set aside for projects just like this, to build wealth and equity in highly desirable neighborhoods. So I just want to thank y'all. This is so forward-thinking. You're putting the streetscape back, which is super exciting. Everything about this is really smart, and it's going to tie into to transportation as well, so folks can get to jobs and to healthcare and to services. So I just really want to thank y'all. I'm really excited about it.
We appreciate you.
Yeah,
And one thing,
thank you for the support.
What I just want to preface it too is we're going to be phasing this out in multiple phases. So when we talk about our ask, we want obviously commitment for those dollars, but we don't necessarily need $1.4 million pumped in day one. If we can phase this out and over this couple of years as we do that, they may provide some other options for funding that we're not thinking about currently too.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, the first phase of houses that we're building are going to face Carondelet and Barone Streets, so that we're able to commence those without starting the construction of Thalia Street. Thalia Street's our biggest single infrastructure expense and the biggest item to which we're tying the city investment in the project. So that, to Michael's point, we need to understand that we can get a commitment for those dollars, but we have a little time for how and when they come to the project.
All right, colleagues, any other questions? Well, before I let you guys go, I just want to say publicly, I really am excited about this. I'm happy to be working with you. This whole thing started with a meeting in my office, and Brian Gibbs and Mike Sherman and a few others were there. Forgive me for not remembering all the names, but a few other developers were there. And this whole conversation was, wanting to be cooperative with the $1 million developments, but it was critical for me to make sure that we had affordable housing, and that seemed to have been lost in the wash. And I want to say publicly to all of you guys, thank you for hearing me. Thank you for understanding that this city has to be accessible to all of us, not just the millionaires, but to the folks that make our trains move. So with that, again, I just want to say thank you for starting this. I'm excited, and I feel very confident that this will be something that we're going to get national press about, because this looks like it's going to work, and it'll be something that we can export. I mean, nobody has fun like us, nobody cooks like us, nobody has the lifestyle we have, but this is something that is business and people oriented that I think will go around the world with putting New Orleans on a whole different stratosphere compared to everybody. Everybody in the country is facing affordable housing issues, and this is a way to address it that others haven't looked at, and I'm very proud to be a part of this. So with that, gentlemen, thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember.
All right, moving on. The next presentation is going to be led by Ms. Nia Weeks. Nia is the founder and executive director of Citizens She United. There is a PowerPoint, and it'll be followed by questions. We have advertised ordinance number 33184, and that ordinance was introduced at the last meeting, but then deferred to this committee so that we could discuss it and hear it. And we'll have the presentation and then talk about the ordinance afterwards. So with that, Nia, please.
Actually, Banks, I'm going to go ahead and open it up.
I'm sorry, I didn't see you there. You hadn't popped up. I didn't realize you were here. Okay, Councilmember Moreno.
I'm here. I've been watching everything, and thank you so much, Councilmember Banks, for letting me bring this ordinance to community development, because it actually goes very well with the last statement that you just said. Obviously, we all want a fair, accessible, equitable city, and one, of course, that's also free of discrimination. So thanks to Nia Weeks and her group and other advocates, I was able to file during the last council meeting on first read, an ordinance which prohibits discrimination based upon hairstyles associated with a particular race or national origin. So today we brought together a group of great panelists to speak to this committee and speak to the public about the importance of this ordinance. So let me quickly tell you who they are, and then I'll briefly discuss kind of the history of how we got to this point. So Nia Weeks, she'll be before us today. She's the founder and executive director of Citizens She United. Damian Smith of Detangled Inc. will also be with us, and Professor Wendy Green, whose research, advocacy, and testimony has really helped to drive this type of legislation. So I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with what's been happening with this type of legislation, but right now, there are only 7 states that have made it illegal to discriminate because of hairstyle. And those 7 states are California, New York, New Jersey, Virginia, Colorado, Washington, and Maryland. Obviously, Louisiana at this point is not one of them, but hopefully we're going to change that, right, Nia? So our panelists, they're going to more thoroughly dive into the Crown Act, which is actually federal legislation that aims to correct racial injustices by making hair discrimination illegal at the federal level. The U.S. House of Representatives has voted and passed the Crown Act. However, the U.S. Senate still needs to hear and pass that bill. So in the interim, cities around the country and states as well have taken steps towards similar protections in their own communities. In October 2020, the Pittsburgh City Council passed their version of the Crown Act. Kansas City has done the same with an ordinance that went into effect November 1st of this year. So it is now time for New Orleans to join that movement as well. Our panelists will provide remarks regarding how Black women's hair is policed in the workplace, how many feel compelled to change their hair to fit in at their place of employment, and how others face disciplinary action as a result of their natural hair or protective styles. These injustices not only impact their lives at a given workplace, but touch upon housing, real estate, and public accommodations as well. As a city, we must address any and all barriers facing people of color, and especially women of color, in the workplace and in other aspects of professional and personal life. We must acknowledge that society has deemed a professional excludes Black individuals from professional and social environments. And this, of course, we must work to change. Again, I want to just say thank you to our panelists, in particular, Nia Weeks. Thank you so much for reaching out to me to sponsor this for you. And with that, Nia, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Marino. Thank you so much to this entire City Council. I was talking to my team and I've done some audacious things the last few years, and this really is near and dear to my personal heart. I will say between last night and this morning, I was inundated with calls of gratitude and excitement from Black women and girls across the city. There are actually some girls that are going to school today rocking their Afro puffs, excited about being seen and heard in this way. So New Orleans, let's get ready to do a Crown Act. Black women in the city, we are the highest voting population in the city. We're one of the highest voting population in the state. And we need policies that reflect us, who we are, the things that are important to us. And the Crown Act speaks directly to that. If we can do the next slide, and I'm going to introduce our first speaker. Professor Wendy Green is, wait, before we go there, I want to play this video. I'm sorry. I want to play this video very quickly, and then we're going to go to our first speaker.
Let's face it, hair matters to everybody. But the authors of this new law say that women with kinky and curly hair are often discriminated against, viewed as inferior even. Dove recently sponsored a survey that showed that Black women were 80% more likely to change their natural hair to conform to social norms and expectations on the job. So there are a lot of folks who think this new law is long overdue.
You've been to the Supreme Court before.
Yes, I have.
So do you ever think or contemplate or worry about the way the world will perceive your hair? Have you ever think about that?
I did when I actually first went, because it was short, because when you stop perming your hair, you have to cut all that off. And so I was afraid when I first went to court, and I got so many compliments, and I continue to get so many compliments. It kind of was like I wish I had done it sooner. So no, I've embraced it. I love it. And, I never think about it now. When I first did it, yeah, but now, no. I think that it's a part of my identity. It's a part of who I am, and I wear it in such a way that it's definitive, and it defines me as a person. And I think people look to it because of the fact that I have the hair.
Perms would usually last maybe 6 weeks before you have to get another one. Mm-hmm. But then that was another thing you had to be careful of, because some of the perms were too strong and it would burn your scalp just as bad. It's a torture process for me now that I look back on it and think about it. It really was a hard thing, for the sake of being, I'm just like I am. I didn't need all of that. But the norm was to have the long, straight hair as what was acceptable in society at that time.
California State Senator Holly Mitchell introduced the first law to associate hair as an extension of one's race, which is legally protected.
Terminated because of the way they choose to wear their hair. The way my hair grows out of my head as a Black woman is a trait of race.
Look at it on you.
Everybody can't do red. Everybody can. This happened when I moved to New Orleans. This is when I was natural, but I had like a really big fro. It's always red. And I felt like I was like doing the politically correct thing with my hair, just trying to keep the fro to where it wasn't, I worked in corporate America at the time, so where it wasn't like too much. So nobody would say anything to me. Natural hair was still a new concept. And so I moved here, and this was the moment when I was like, I don't think I want to work in a corporate environment. I don't think it's for me. I don't want to be what people think I should be, or people, imagination of me, or I don't want people to tell me what I should be. Like, this is who I always have been. And so I basically cut my hair down to a short taper and shaved the sides.
And I can remember many times there was like 3 little black girls in the class always being asked, can I touch your hair? We all had the 2 braided pigtails or 3 braided pigtails being asked, can I touch your hair? Because they'd never seen anything like it. That's why I like Crown, creating a respectful and open world for natural hair.
Thank you so much for that. This video is the local Black women. We had Gus Bennett, a local photographer who we're all familiar with, did 120 pictures of Black women in their hair around February of last year. We put together a docu-series, and these Black women have been pushing this agenda ever since then. This was also produced, we teamed up with 4910 Rosalie Productions this year and put together 75 online engagements, and part of that online engagement was a whole week dedicated to Black women's hair. I want to introduce you to a phenomenal, brilliant friend of mine. Her name is Dr. Wendy Green. Dr. Wendy Green and I actually became friends through social media around this issue. It is her work, her thoughts, her desire for equity that has centered around the verbiage around the Crown Act. And so I thought it was very important Wendy come on and speak to you all. Dr. Wendy Green is also a student of Xavier University. So is always coming back, teaching lawyers and students. Wendy, I'm gonna let you take over.
Well, thank you so much, Nia, for your wonderful introduction, and again for allowing me to be a part of this presentation of, again, legislation that is near and dear to my heart. I just want to extend greetings to everyone on the committee, Chairman Banks and the members of the Community Development Committee for engaging this really important topic today, and Nia for your outstanding leadership in ensuring that the Crown Act is a law in New Orleans. As Nia mentioned, I am a professor of law at Drexel University Thomas R. Klein School of Law. I'm also one of the legal architects for the Federal Crown Act that was recently passed by the United States House of Representatives, as well as state level Crown Acts. I am also the founder of the #FreeTheHair movement, which Nia is referring to, and how we became involved with one another on this issue, and the author of a forthcoming book, #FreeTheHair, Black Hair, Locking Black Hair to Civil Rights Movements. And again, as Nia mentioned, I am an adopted daughter of New Orleans because I am a proud graduate of Xavier University of Louisiana and Tulane University Law School. So for over a decade, I've published an authoritative body of legal scholarship on what I've coined grooming codes discrimination. And in this capacity, I've served as a legal expert in racial discrimination cases, challenging natural hair bans in workplaces and schools. I've also, as I just mentioned, been involved in the drafting of these types of legal reforms. And as one of the leading scholars on this civil rights issue, I really devoted my career to not only activating these legal reforms like the ordinance under consideration today, but really trying to raise public awareness around the harms of unchecked discriminatory grooming policies. For example, policies that denigrate African descendants' natural hairstyles as distracting, extreme, excessive, unkempt, and unprofessional. These grooming policies are often informed by negative racial stereotypes, and in doing so, they systematically deprive African descendants of employment, housing, and access to public accommodations, among other things. They too systematically result in the stigmatizing and harassing treatment of Black women, girls, boys, and men in public and private spheres. But notably, when we're dealing with Black women and girls, natural hair bands require them, as the beautiful video just demonstrated, to either cut off their hair or wear their hair straightened. And the latter is usually achieved through toxic chemicals, extreme heat styling, wigs and weaves, which are expensive and time-consuming to maintain. Long-term use of chemical relaxants, heat, wigs and weaves often cause what I call invisible harm, such as temporary or permanent damage to our scalps, to our psyches, to our hair. We suffer chemical burns while chemical relaxers are being applied, which are not only excruciatingly painful, but also severely damaging. Black women and girls often endure hair breakage, balding, as well as scalp disorders like alopecia due to chemical relaxers, as well as wigs and weaves and extreme heat being applied. Some of the other things that most people are not aware of is, the potential correlations between hair straightening products that African descendant women commonly use and their increased chances of developing uterine fibroids, hormone-related infertility, and more aggressive forms of breast and uterine cancer. Studies even indicate a possible linkage between chemical relaxants and increased hormonal activity amongst African descendant girls. Therefore, natural hair bands leave African descendant women and girls in a very precarious catch-22. Either don your natural hair at the risk of lawfully being deprived of an employment or educational opportunity, or don straight hair at the risk of enduring consequential harms to our psychological, physical, and physiological well-being. As Councilwoman Moreno has already noted, there has been considerable legal and policy change within the past year and a half, with 7 states, several municipalities enacting the Crown Acts, human rights agencies like in New York, for example, issuing groundbreaking enforcement guidance declaring natural hair discrimination as race discrimination, and even more recently, multinational companies like UPS revoking company policies that bar employees from wearing natural hairstyles. However, this harmful bind many African descendant women and girls find themselves is lawful in 43 states due to what I call a hair-splitting legal distinction federal courts have created. Shortly after the 1964 Civil Rights Act was enacted, federal courts adopted what is known as the Immutability Doctrine that limits the scope of legal protection against racial discrimination to discrimination on the basis of what they've called immutable racial characteristics, presumably like one's skin color. Applying this misguided doctrine for nearly 40 years, federal courts have repeatedly declared that when an employer denies an African descendant a job because she adorns an afro, the employer engages in unlawful race discrimination. However, the moment she twists, locks, or braids her afro and suffers adverse treatment on those grounds, the employer's discrimination is deemed lawful. Hence why we need the Crown Act. This ordinance before your consideration today helps to cure this unjustifiable gap in civil rights protection for African descendants who suffer natural hair discrimination. And this indeed is a pervasive form of racial discrimination that harkens back to the eras of racial slavery in this country. For nearly 4 centuries, like our skin color, African descendants hairstyles resulting from our curly or coily hair texture have served as a marker of our racial identity and thus a vehicle of racial enslavement, segregation, and subordination. Early in American history, jurists declared that a woolly hair texture or a hair texture inclined to be woolly signified African ancestry or Blackness, and an individual's straight hair texture signified European ancestry or whiteness. Therefore, a person could be consigned to enslavement, perpetual enslavement, solely on the basis of their woolly hair texture, and the straightness of one's hair could legally render a person free. And as many of you, I'm sure, are probably already aware, even in Louisiana in 1786, Governor Esteban Miro issued a sumptuary law that exclusively regulated the hair of African-descended women. Miro's edict, also known as the Tignon Law, mandated that they cover or wrap their hair in cloth to signify their legal status as enslaved people. In response, what enslaved and free women of color did is that they adorned their heads with beautifully ornate headscarves known as tignons, which amplified their beauty and signified their resistance and empowerment within a social and legal order aimed to suppress their personhood, individuality, and freedom. Unfortunately, in the 21st century, one exercise of freedom still remains connected to the texture of one's hair. Race-based natural hair discrimination is a common barrier to African descendants' employment and educational opportunities, as well as to housing and public accommodations, even in New Orleans area. Like, for example, 11-year-old Faith Finity, who was told in 2018 on her first day of school that she had to remove her braids in order to attend Christ the King Elementary School in Terrytown. Or Jage Payadu, who was forced to withdraw from University of Holy Cross nursing program because her natural hair was considered inappropriate, not neat, and too big. However, this ordinance today under consideration aids in rectifying the centuries-old state of affairs. It makes clear that systemic discrimination that African descendants endure on the basis of our natural and protective hairstyles, like we have endured on the basis of other race-based characteristics such as our skin color, constitutes race discrimination. Therefore, as an adopted daughter of New Orleans, I commend you for joining your fellow lawmakers across the country who are advancing this vital legal reform, which clarifies that racial discrimination consists of discrimination on the basis of characteristics that are historically, contemporarily, and commonly associated with racial identity.
Wendy, like, as always, like, I will tell you, every time I get the opportunity to share space with Wendy, I am just grateful for not just her work and dedication to this work. Wendy, thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. And Wendy will be available at the end of this for all questions that you have. If we could have next slide, please. So why do we need a Crown Act here in New Orleans? I want to hear from the voices of our women in New Orleans. So let's go to the next slide and hear what Dr. Joya Cryer has to say.
Yes, but I was being truthful. So it's a fact. So we have data to support that your birth outcomes are improved in communities where you have more political engagement. So that means if you have less voter suppression, more people who represent you, who represent the people who are your issues, right? So when you think about why this is so important for Black people, especially, they love blaming us for our birth outcomes. They love blaming us for our maternal mortality, blaming us and shaming us for our outcomes without ever us having any political engagement. When have we ever had, even in New Orleans, representation that's reflective of our values, not just people who match boxes is 66% Black, so we have 66% of the city council is Black, but really the values of Black women and people who are raising families in the community, and that's across the board. So yeah, yes, but I was being truthful.
Thank you for that. So race-based hair discrimination, hair-based discrimination is just that. To define discrimination, it's behavior that treats people unequally because of their membership in groups. 80% of Black female subjects within the study agreed they felt the need to alter their natural hairstyle to fit in to professional settings. And that is something that has resonated across the board with Black women, even from the phone calls that I received today. And as Professor pointed out, we could do next slide, please.
In which our hair, right, is used to criminalize us, right, to push us out of workplaces and workspaces, to cause us to feel inferior or unprepared, right, or that we're undeserving of the same respect or compensation as our white colleagues. Yeah, and I think for me, what I've also experienced is this sort of, I don't know how to describe it. It's kind of like counseling or talking with clients or community members. And it's clear that they've been discriminated against on the basis of their race, right? But they're telling you, and she said this about my hair, or, this, they touched my hair. And I'm like, girl, that's unlawful discrimination, right? But I think even like thinking of it that way and helping our loved ones and our friends and fellow community members come to appreciate it in that way, right? It's not just respectability politics, although I believe it is that, right? It's not just subscription to white supremacy. It also is a form of discrimination, right, on the basis of race.
Thank you. Next slide, please. And it is a discrimination based on our race. What is prejudice? Prejudice is an opinion, prejudgment, or attitude about a group or individual members. A prejudice can be positive, but in our usage refers to negative attitudes. The study showed that Black women are 1.5 times more likely to be sent home from workplace because of their hair. It's interesting when I have conversations, when Professor Wendy and I have with people outside of our personal structure about hair, they assume it to be a cosmetic issue. But there are decisions, health decisions, economic decisions made by Black women daily based on our hair. It's in the prejudice that unfolds is a form of discrimination. Next slide, please.
Oftentimes for Black folks, you mentioned, Mia, that we're not a monolith, right? I think if our goal is liberation, or if we can agree that the goal is freedom and liberation, then I think I would offer that there are many paths to this goal. And there should be, and there needs to be a lot of different ways in which we are working towards this goal of liberation and freedom. And I would offer that, there are those of us who are working within the system to push back, to rewrite, to make things better. And I think it's up to us to respect and to support when we can.
Thank you. And that is our very own Gia Gregory Mama Hamilton, who is the director of the African American Museum and that development that is happening. For that, Gia, next slide, please. What is a stereotype? A stereotype is an exaggerated belief or disoriented truth about a person or a group. A generalization that allows for little or no individual difference or social variation. The same study also found that Black women's hair is 3.4 times more likely to be considered unprofessional. My decision to go with my locks as opposed to a straight hairstyle into the courtroom was something that caught people. They caught their breath from them when I first said I was going to make this decision. It was a decision that was best for me and my lifestyle. But the reception of it by general public, reception of it by people in court was scary for people who cared about me. And there was discouragement from this decision because the fear that it would be considered unprofessional, that I would lose work, that I would lose the opportunity to move just based on my hair. Next slide, please.
Talk to their legislators and build relationships with their district staff about how important it is to meet this moment and to step outside their comfort zone. Because what we're doing right now is outside of what people are used to. It's outside of what they're comfortable with, and they have to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. That's the change. It really is. And in doing that, you begin to imagine a life outside of the realm of what's in your understanding, outside of what you're currently living.
Because race-based discrimination is something that's so ingrained in our community, so ingrained in our society, we are asking people to step outside their comfort zone. This woman that you're hearing from, Leah Bear, hear from her colleague, Delilah Clay, work with Wendy Green, Professor Wendy Green, to get that first Crown Act passed in California. We had a long conversation, an hour-long conversation about the Crown Act and lobbying and all pieces there and too, and you'll hear from them a little bit more in a second. Saying is that we're asking people to step outside of what's comfortable. We're also asking Black women to step outside of, that is my doorbell, based on what history has taught us, that it is okay to discriminate against us, multiple barriers, and to embrace the love and care of ourselves, bodies, is something new for us too. It's a journey that we're excited to. Next slide. And yes, although despite 30 years of equal rights legislation of poverty as it relates to housing, as we heard earlier, racial profiling is still a common practice. There's a misnotion that professionalism, bolstered by grooming policies that prohibit historically Black natural hairstyles, has individuals from both professional and social environments. Next slide, please.
What was coming across from the people that were going to be experiencing the goodness from the passing of this bill?
I mean, it was nothing but love. And I would say it was nothing but love from the community, of course, especially, right? But when we were walking the halls of the Capitol, lobbying this bill, we were very intentional about lobbying nearly every member of the legislature, because we knew that we had to educate people on the importance of this bill by painting a picture and telling a story. And we had to do that because, like you just said, people who are non-Black, they don't understand what the differences is in Black hair and what that means to us as a people, right?
I mean, and there is a reality, you know, on our city council, we don't have a Black woman that can do that around educating. And so I'm grateful to you all, because when it comes to issues around race, when it comes to issues around women's issues, all of you all have engaged me for years. Around learning more, having better understanding, you know, really understanding. One thing that I am grateful with Councilmember Moreno, many of you don't know that she has been a force with me for quite some time. She offered me literature, offered me resources, offered me support, and has never asked for anything in return. Has, you know, she's a part of the reason why most people don't know that is because she's always in the background, helping me push, helping to gain better understanding, helping to make sure that this is, and not just connect me here in the city, but across the other Black women and Black. Next slide, please.
Probably listening to us, because we're pretty smart. You know, I have straight A's for a reason, not straight A's. But you know, like listening to us and asking us questions, because I've had people be like, well, what do you think about this environmental bill? And I told them, literally, I have a whole analysis for it. And people are surprised. I'm like, you really shouldn't be that surprised, because we do know a lot. Just because we're not 18 and we don't pay taxes and vote, like we're still American citizens and we need to know what's going on. So,
agreed. And Lana?
yeah, definitely. Like listening to the voices of young people, because we have a lot to say, even though we aren't always listened to. But
yeah. I love that.
I love that too. And so this comes from, we did a summer camp internship called Cyber Justice, where we took a group of young Black girls from rooted in different schools across the city and did a digital organizing summer camp. And part of what we did with that digital organizing summer camp was teach them not just how to organize, but how to create videos for change that uplifted issues that were important to them. Without even talking to them about what we thought was important, we asked them to come up with 2 issues that meant something to them that they would create their videos on. The 2 issues that they chose were hair discrimination and voting. And I will say that was not influenced by my daughter, Peyton, at all. That was really what the girls came up with. Even my students at Xavier, the things that were most important were reproductive justice and hair discrimination and civic engagement. You know, these babies have a very, very real understanding of what they want to see move forward. And so we are going to see one of their videos. If we could do the next slide.
What's hair got to do with it? I've spent all day getting my hair done just to have you tell me that it's a distraction? My hair is a part of me and something that makes me feel happy. So why would that stop people from learning what's hair got to do with it? My freshly done braids, my radiant melanin drip waves, and yet I'm told that my braids are not of God's ways. Also that I will be suspended for days. If that's the case, then how come my white peers get to dye their hair in different colors and cut their hair in different ways? What's hair got to do with it? Instead of compliments today, I was met with stares, and my hair determined my fate. I went home crying because I just couldn't understand how such a beautiful part of me could get me banned. What's hair got to do with it, you may ask? When you're caught appropriating our culture once again, a culture that is not meant for you, but meant for me, what's my hair got to do with it? Everything. My hair is beautiful. My hair is authentic. My hair is me. I will not give you control over this beauty. So I will continue to wear my hair in every style because my beautiful hair adds to my beautiful smile.
Thank you for that. Next slide, please. So these wonderful images come from Bennett, local photographer. These are just a small sampling of the 120 Black women who showed up and wanted to celebrate their hair, their daughter's hair, their colleagues' hair. Each image represents a moment of pride, a moment of joy, many moments of sacrifice. There's a story behind each picture. But at the end, it's communal care and love for self, communal care and love for each other, and communal care and love for our hair. This is the true representation of what you get when you allow Black women to live our full, free selves, and don't allow and disallow discrimination based on our hair. Next slide, please. The city of New Orleans, you know, the attitude of having this bill introduced, the joy that resonates, and you know, and the reality is that Black women today in this city, in this state, in this country, joy need to be celebrated. And this bill is a direct response to acknowledging the need of celebration of Black women and girls in this city, in the city of New Orleans. Next slide, please.
I feel like Wendy and Leah said it all. They said everything that needs to be said. At the end of the day, we just want to be ourselves. We want that's what the Crown Act is about. It's not that you have to wear natural hair. It's that you have the choice to do what you think is best for you and not have to weigh the ramifications of what is somebody going to think of this and is it going to affect me economically, right? Like we just want the freedom to make choices for ourselves, to proclaim our own beauty, to claim our own spaces and not be judged for that. And that's it. That's it. We don't think we're better than anybody else, though Black women go.
That was absolutely one of my favorite conversations with these three Black women that were the pioneers of getting the first Crown Act passed in California. We're nearing the end of our presentation. I want to close this out with the voices of Black women right here in this city, and then we'll open up for questions. Next slide, please.
Oh, if you can hear my voice, the stories she would tell. My wish dances to the rhythm of our ancestors. You might call them the winds. My hair not defines me, but it's like a symbol for like who I am as a person, and shows that
I'm proud. I can be, you know, it's versatile, so I can do just about anything. My bush stands tall, like a beanie, Rosa and Harriet.
My hair gives me courage. My hair allows me to be who I am.
Which reminds me that I am a queen like Coretta. Us queens are the only ones with strands like these.
Be free to be whoever you want to be, and color. Like I'm in color now because I love the color purple and it's royal, and I want to feel I'm important, I'm beautiful in whatever state my hair is, whether it's going white or it stays purple or red or whatever color that I choose. That you shouldn't judge someone by your hair.
Good, bad, indifferent, judgment, non-judgment, nothing stops me from being my authentic self. And I pride myself for showing up in spaces as my authentic self, because it's a very brave thing to do. And I think it's something that women that look like me struggle with. And I want them to know that I am the example of what it looks like to be yourself, even in the face of adversity.
When you see me, hair is all you see, but she is my crown, my crown, my crown that covers me. Oh, if you can hear my bush, the story she was saying.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Damian, for running that PowerPoint for us. I'm really grateful for that. Thank you, Professor Wendy, for your introduction and comments. And I guess we'll open up the floor for questions and comments.
Nia, thank you so much for really a fantastic presentation. As always, you have just brought together a tremendous group of advocates. And Professor Green, what an honor to have you with us. You are a national advocate on this cause. And just thank you for what you've been doing, obviously, not just here in New Orleans, but across the country and in the United States Congress as well. So thank you for that. You know, when Nia brought this to me, and we were initially talking about bringing this to the state legislature, and you know, then we started discussing about starting here in New Orleans, because the conversation is so important, right? The conversation and education piece is so important. And so as we pass this here in New Orleans, because I have confidence in my colleagues here that we're going to get this passed, but as we pass this here in New Orleans and become leaders as one of the first cities to pass this type of ordinance in this nation, let's from here move on to the state legislature. And I'll tell you all this. I talked with Representative Candace Newell, who is incredibly interested in speaking with you all and carrying this legislation for you. She also brought up something really important too, that I believe it was briefly mentioned in the presentation, but I think it's important to bring up and highlight a little bit more, is that potential health consequences that also are apparent because of this type of discrimination. You know, women feeling that they must be forced to wear their hair a certain way could prevent them from, you know, going out to the gym, because they're worried that should they go out and do that, that now their hair is not going to be what it needs to be. And that's not right. That's inappropriate, you know, for someone to be made to feel that way. And so I'm just proud of this coalition, Nia, that you built. And I just thank you for bringing this to me. I'm incredibly proud to sponsor this ordinance. And just really, I have no questions, because we've talked about this for quite some time, Nia, you and I, but I'm just really proud of your efforts, and let's just keep building on it. Let's start here. Let's take it to other cities. You know, Nia, I'm going to continue to connect you with folks around the country. Let's take this to the state legislature. You know, Professor Green, you tell us what we need to do to get this through the Senate, because that's the current barrier right now, because we're standing with you. So with that, I'll turn it over to any of my colleagues for any comments, and after that, I'll take public comment. Councilmember Palmer.
All right, thank you. I just want to thank you, Councilman Moreno, for doing it. And Nia, thank you once again. You're just a dynamo on this issue. And I just, you know, I'm in between two worlds, right? Where you say it's insane that we even have to bring this up in the 21st century, right? But then I'm also of the other mindset that what an incredible celebration of who you are as women. And as a mother of 3 daughters, I couldn't even imagine, because hair is such a part of their expression of their self, right? And we all know if we have daughters, it changes weekly, monthly, especially as they go through childhood and middle school, especially, and then high school. And I couldn't even imagine how that would affect them going through that period of trying to find out who you are and then being judged on that, right? Because that is such a personal way, but it's also an expressive way to find out who you are, right? So, so please add my name to this. I am 120% with y'all, and anything that I can do to help, I really would. And I just want to say those photographs were absolutely amazing. I just want to plaster them all over City Hall, because the joy, especially in the children's faces and the pride, was just remarkable. So thank you very much.
We'll have your name added. Anyone else like to say anything? Councilmember Nguyen?
Yes, thank you, Council Vice President Nia. Thank you, and Dr. Green. I truly enjoyed the presentation. It actually was very uplifting. It reminded me of my girlfriend. She's Asian, but her texture of her hair was a little bit different than your normal Asian girl that we were growing up. And I remember Lori just kind of like, well, I feel like I'm a little bit different from you guys. And so it brought me back literally almost 45 years ago when we were very little girls and growing up and trying to figure out, well, is this okay? Or how do you deal with it? And so I really want to just thank you guys for bringing these, and many times we don't think about it, right? And so at first when I was tuning into the presentation, I was like, what? This is really happening in the world? I said, that's crazy. You know, but then as I continue to listen to the testimony and the stories, and then bringing me back 45 years ago, I was like, oh my gosh, you know, and I want to thank you guys for taking action on this. And yes, so Council Vice President, if I could also add my name as well, I would love to support this. This is very important and very critical for our community. And so again, ladies, thank you for your leadership in making this happen.
Thank you, Councilmember Nguyen. We'll have you added.
Thank
Councilmember
you.
Banks?
Thank you. I too would ask that my name be added. It's clear that I will never have those hair issues. But the fact is that we need to fully acknowledge that Black women go through a life struggle like none other. The economic disparity, the sexism disparity, the whole idea of having to survive in a world that the cards are stacked against you is something that Black women have to live with every day. And if there's something as simple as removing something that you have no control over, your hair is your hair, you were born with it. And if we can make that hill a little easier for them to climb, I think we have gone a long way. Now, I am very much so understanding that discrimination is a cancer that plagues this country. This is just one step, but I'm very happy to be taking this step, because everything that we can do to chip away at that, I think we're getting towards a world where all people are looked at for what they're worth, not for what they look like. And I am very, very, very sorry that in this world in 2020, that we still have to even be discussing these kinds of issues. But they are as real as rain. For those people that don't understand, I guess it's because it doesn't affect you. I guess people that want to dismiss these kinds of things as being not that important, it's because your daughter or your sister or your wife does not have to live with it. Well, for those of us who do have those folks that have to live with, for those of us that have people in our circle that that do have to wear this burden every day. It is something that we holistically need to be looking at. And I'm excited. I mean, I think that this was a fabulous day at the community development meeting, because dealing with issues that affect the least of our community, talking about affordable housing, talking about trying to dismantle systemic racism or systemic racist practices, I think is a really, really good thing. And I'm very excited to be here. I'm very excited to be here at this time. So hopefully we will continue to take these steps. And while I'm fully expecting that New Orleans will move to the forefront of this affordable housing issue with this program that we just talked about, I'm excited that we're going to be moving to the forefront of this issue by being the first municipality to actually adopt some legislation to talk about prohibiting this. So with that, I join you, I support you, and whatever I can do to be able to help you, count me in. Madam Vice President, would you like to call for the vote, please?
Actually, Councilmember Banks, I'm not sure if we have a public comment on this.
I do not. Hold on. Jarvis, we have public comment?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's rock.
We have one comment from Tillman Hardy, who is not being paid. And the comment says, I support this ordinance. My daughter was discriminated against for her hair many years ago. All New Orleans Parish schools should follow suit. And that's the public comment.
Thank you, Jarvis. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'd like to move adoption. If I could get a second.
Second.
Seconded by the chairman.
Would please call the roll. Yay.
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 Well, thank you all. With that, we will move this on to the council's agenda with a unanimous support. And if we have no further business, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Thank you, folks. And remember, please wear a mask. Not only save your life, but save somebody else's. We are far from out of this pandemic. So please be mindful that we still got to do what we got to do. The vaccine is not a cure. It's not even here yet. So make sure you continue to social distance, wear your mask, and wash your hands. Thank you all and be safe. And we are adjourned. Thank you, sir.